presentation on the current condition of the Arbor Creek Subdivision Bridge by town engineer Mary Harrington. So Mary, I'll hand it on to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom. And I also have Pat Stevens, highway superintendent, who's going to be assisting in this. So the things that we're going to touch on tonight is just an overview of the Arbor Creek subdivision, the timeline of events in relation to our bridge discoveries, bridge construction discussion, the design deficiencies that have been identified by consultants and other agencies, possible solutions and their challenges, the current condition of the bridge, and then how we propose to move forward. So a little history on the subdivision. The developer was Pridemark Homes. The subdivision and Section 1 timeline, which the bridge was constructed during Section 1. In October of 2013, the parcel was rezoned from an R3 single-family residential district to medium-high residential district. In August of 2014, they received Section 1 approval from the planning board. And then by July of 2016, the site work for Section 1, which included the bridge work, was completed. And then just some unique features about the subdivision. They are close to the FEMA floodplain, so that was something that was discussed at length during the planning board approvals. 84 of the acres of this parcel were donated to the town and exist as park district or park lands, and it's an HOA community. And right now the subdivision recently finished their final section, which was Section 4. So a timeline of events in relation to the bridge. So in November of 2017, the town took permanent dedication of the road and bridge for Arbor Creek Section 1. In November of 2020, the Highway Department noticed longitudinal surface cracking on the bridge. The former highway superintendent and another town staff met on site with Monroe County DOT, and that expert in the field recommended that we invest in an engineering assessment of the bridge. The town contracted with Robbie Engineering to provide that assessment report right after that site visit in December of 2020 through January of 21. The next few months were kind of a discovery phase for the town. We were reviewing the report, consulting with Monroe County DOT, and then we also, the supervisor sat down and discussed the findings with the developer, Pridemark. In the summer of last year, we had further discussions with Robbie, and they were able to get a contact with New York State Region 4, the structures management engineer, and Pat and myself met on site to review his assessment of the conditions. In August of last year, we received a written assessment from that Region 4 structures management engineer. We also worked with New York State DOT to assign a BIN, a bridge identification number, to this bridge. Any structure that is 20 feet or greater in span has to be registered with New York State DOT. And then part of being in that registration, New York State DOT will perform an annual general bridge inspection. So we were given that report too towards the end of last year. In September, the supervisor relayed the written assessment from New York State DOT to the developer, and we were requesting greater detail of the design from Pridemark and their contracted engineering team. And then over the past few months, we've further investigated the situation between conversations with New York State DOT, Monroe County DOT, and Robbie Engineering. We have not obtained any further information from Pridemark and their engineers. And so that brings us to this town board workshop and discussing an action plan. So for the bridge construction, while we were going through the site plan review process back in 2014, 2015, The town was provided plans and details for the bridge. These plans were prepared and stamped by a licensed engineer at Marathon Engineering. And then specifically to the structural design plans and loading calculations for the bridge, this was a delegated design that was prepared and stamped by a licensed structural engineer, Arbor and Bryce Incorporated. The bridge in the field was installed in accordance with the design plans referenced above. And based on the conclusions rendered by New York State DOT, Monroe County DOT, and Robbie Engineering, the current deficiencies and premature wear are the direct result of failures in the design. So these design deficiencies, and again, I'll reiterate that these are conclusions by our consultants and other agencies who specify in this type of work. Undersized plank units. The bridge is composed of 6 planks that go, lengthwise. The way that you drive, they don't go perpendicular, they go parallel to the way you drive across them. And these planks are 8 inches in thickness, and based on the span, you'd expect them to be 15 inches in thickness. And there's also varying widths, so that each plank isn't able to withstand the same loading. So there's kind of inconsistent load spread across the planks. And given the climate and application, these plank units aren't specified. The plank units specified in this work should not have been used for a bridge in western New York. These pre-stressed, prefabricated concrete planks are used in building construction. So they're not intended to be out in the elements. They're intended for interior applications. And they're also more flexible than what you would construct a bridge out of. There is a lack of mechanical shear connectors between the planks and the supporting beams, so that there's not as great of a load transfer between the horizontal and the vertical components of the bridge. And there's a lack of transverse tendons to distribute the loads across the planks. So these varying widths of 190 and 50 inches of planks, they don't work as one coherent surface, so they aren't able to distribute loads between one another. And then there's also a question as to whether the foundation design renders them susceptible to scour. It appears that it is a spread footing on native soils, which is not the recommended methodology for installing these next to a creek. Turn it over to Pat.
Okay, I'll take some of these solutions and run through them. There's been a great deal of thought on our part and review of potential options for dealing with the conditions that Mary just outlined, and this presentation does. The first couple are ones that we've basically ruled out. Option 1 would be rehabilitating the existing plank units. The inadequacies in this approach would be that the planks aren't the right product for this application to begin with. They're susceptible to salt and moisture damage, as we've already seen, and they will likely continue to fatigue due to their flexibility over time. And it does not remove the concern of the foundation scour, which is the vertical portion of the structure. Option 2 would be to replace the plank units. So taking the 8-inch thick planking units that are currently in place and replacing them with the approximately 15-inch thick planks, possibly, depending on the design that would come with them. This would actually result in a misalignment of the roadway, not be a vertical misalignment. So essentially, in order to increase the thickness of the planking on the bridge, it would raise it. So you would either have a hump coming into it, or you'd have to elongate sort of a tapered going up onto the bridge and then coming back down, which just isn't ideal for driving or maintenance on those surfaces, especially plowing and resurfacing operations that our highway department would want to do on this facility. And it also does not remove the concern of scour with the foundation. So that's why those options that we looked into are not particularly feasible as actual solutions. So we move into viable solutions. So these are possible remedies for the conditions that we have. Complete replacement. So essentially take out what's there and replace it in kind, obviously with some different materials and options put in place, but to have a abutment and decking style bridge replace them. That would be by far the most expensive option. That approach, although it allows for the alleviation of permitting, so it allows us to stay completely out of the stream and the water body. And that type of construction is more expensive, just dollars and cents wise. And it doesn't really gain you any functionality on our end with the maintenance and operation of what happens. There's no advantage to going that route other than staying out of the stream. So that's that approach. Option 4 would be to replace with a precast box culvert and leave the abutments in place. So the abutments would be there, you wouldn't have to pay to remove them, but they wouldn't function as abutments anymore. They would just be left behind the box culvert. This is a less expensive option, not cheap, but less expensive, so still very costly. Placing the permanent structure within the stream, as I said, would require coordination with New York State DEC and Army Corps of Engineers in order to get permits to put such a structure in. And the existing enhancements to the bridge aesthetics would not be financially feasible to replace. The current bridge has a lot of aesthetic features on it, given the situation we're in as the town. It's, in our opinion, and most likely financially as we move forward with the options moving on this, not likely that it would be responsible of us to spend taxpayer dollars on a level of aesthetic that is there now. Just from a purely visual standpoint, we would go for the most cost-effective functional replacement of the feature. Then we move on to the current conditions. So to further outline some of the operational current conditions of the bridge, the reports that we have, the New York State DOT does not recommend reducing load capacity, although we already have, out of an abundance of caution with the type of deterioration we're seeing. We will keep the 4-ton posting to reduce the routine heavy traffic, which will help extend the lifespan of the existing bridge until we can hopefully come to a conclusion on a remedy. The New York State rates the bridge as fair to good in their current report. They are the entity that sort of does this throughout the state as a standard for the condition of bridges. The expected lifespan of this bridge upon being brand new would be expected to be a 70-year item before it would need a level of replacement or repair. The current anticipated replacement for this is 10 to 15 years before we need to essentially have one of the options we're outlining here in place. That would be the life expectancy of the bridge in its current condition, given everything that's been mentioned, instead of 70. So with that, we've identified the action items we'd like to pursue moving forward. We're going to coordinate with the New York State DOT to have a hydraulic vulnerabilities assessment completed on it. Essentially that speaks to the scour aspect that we've been identifying. So the foundations in a flood situation, what is the actual feasibility of having a complete washout of the foundation of the bridge. And along with that, if needed, based on that assessment, we would develop a floodplain warning action plan, again if necessary. Schedule a meeting with New York State DOT local projects unit to understand the availability of funding for these type of repairs. They do have a grant program that happens annually that you apply for. They do prioritize it based on the condition of the bridge. We would certainly qualify for that, but given the age of the bridge and the condition and how many people apply, that's what determines, just like any grant, whether we would actually receive funding for that or not. And really, that's within that 10 to 15 year time frame that we talked about. That would be when we'd have to make a decision, or at least have funding in place. We do want to reach out to the actual design engineers directly versus through the developer, Pridemark. It's not likely, in our opinion, that we will receive direct design information directly from the engineers, as we did not procure it from them. We have no contracts with these companies that would facilitate them releasing the information to us, which is why we've tried to coordinate through the developer. They are the ones that contracted for the services for the design, and we have not been able to obtain that information through that channel. We also are going to continue to receive and review New York State DOT annual bridge inspection reports to monitor the condition as regularly as possible to make sure it doesn't change course, deteriorate faster than we expect, and remains in a good to fair condition where no further restrictions are put on. So,
When you say 10 to 15 year lifespan, is that from when it was installed or from today at its present condition?
From installation, so we're looking at doing something in the next 5 to 10 years.
And thank you, Betty, for starting the Q&A. I will say that, first of all, Mary and Pat, thank you. Very thorough presentation. I think certainly we're going to allow us to go beyond the 15-minute increment on this one. Sorry, Chris and Steve, we'll back up a little, depending on robust questions the board has on this. So, thank you, Betty, for starting off the questions.
Sorry, I just jumped in.
I'm glad you did. Now, Councilman Abbott, who is, your head's got to be spinning being an engineer by trade.
We accepted the engineer's design for this bridge. There had to have been something in our review that indicated it was acceptable, that the calculations were correct. But what if it was built incorrectly because of the wrong size plank streamers? I would think that we could go back to the developer and have some legal ramifications with that developer.
Well,
Can I speak to that?
please do, Mary.
So based on the calculations that were provided by the design engineer, they assumed that there were connections between the planks and the abutments that weren't actually in place, and they were designed. It's my understanding that the way that it was implemented in the field was per their design, so they made errors in their calculation by assuming that these connections were there, even though they didn't put it in what their design documents were. So if you rerun the calculations as it currently stands in the field without these connections, they differ from what the design engineer provided as backup. So there's inaccuracies in the calculations that were provided to the town, and I don't think without the town having a structural engineer and with this being a delegated design, it's really something that would be not caught during the process. It's up to them to,
That's what I'm saying.
provide the right calculations.
They provided incorrect calculations to us. Therefore, it should fall back on them for the responsibility for the repairs or however we proceed, at least in some financial position.
yeah, and this setup and presentation that we put together here is basically separate from that. We have a dedicated bridge, it's documented the condition of it and whatnot. I think that's still valid, but one way or another, this is, moving forward, what needs to happen to focus on the remedy versus some of the other logistics that could happen during that process.
And
what you're talking about.
Bill, I will tell you this, and Charlie, I know that as our town attorney, you were involved in a lot of the back and forth on this issue. Well, actually, I don't remember because I just handed it to you. No, that's okay.
Is that,
I don't. The timeline references a couple of things where the supervisor, that's yours truly, had discussions, met with the developer. And thank you, Mary. And Bill, the best way to sum this up is that the town took dedication of this in 2017. In 2020 is when we noticed there were some problems with this and started that process. At this point now, we own it. So Mary and Pat showed what we have to do as the owners to fix it. Now, as Pat described, I mean, hopefully maybe we can make this a net sum zero game. If it costs X to fix and we get a grant of X and it now will last 7 years, we live happily ever after, whatever. If it ends up costing the town a lot to fix this bridge and we don't get any grants to offset that, I've been very forthcoming with the developer that we will reserve the right to seek indemnification. But Charlie, this is where I would hand it.
well, I'm obviously not going to respond.
Well, there's only one way to get that. You're talking lawsuit, Bill.
Yeah, I understand that.
And you know, without getting into a lot of back and forth on this, at this point, it's my opinion. I mean, we could do a couple things. We could sit there and say, Bill, Patty, Ginny, myself, we'll be long off the board in 10 to 15 years. Kick the can down the road, let the next board years from now handle it. I don't feel good about that. I've told Mary and Pat, let's move this thing along. Let's get the thing resolved now, or as quickly now as we can. I feel better the fact that, you know, and Mary and Pat know this, when the NYSDOT bridge expert said it's not going to fall down tomorrow, I felt better that day. Because we didn't know. You know, to the naked eye, I don't know. You know, it doesn't look good. It's interesting, Bill, and you may know more on this one. Bridges, which is a hot topic with infrastructure and whatever. We were trying to figure out earlier, most of the bridges in Webster are county and state.
Correct.
On the arteries. This is a town road, a town bridge. We don't have staff that is equipped to do the assessment of town. And it's a kit, it's a bridge kit. It's a very ornate bridge, very pretty, this and that. I don't know what other bridges in the town of Webster are on town roads.
Whatever we have is box culvert, I'm pretty sure.
Well, as Pat said, is that a bridge or is that more of a?
Well, it's a 20-foot span is what determines the bridge, and I don't believe that we have any of those on record. It's mostly multiple culverts, squash culvert pipes, box culverts on our larger streams.
Yeah.
This type of structure, being the vertical abutments with decking, is very rare.
Yeah. So.
We own it, we're gonna have to fix it, obviously.
Charlie,
Well,
what's the Greek
where
or Latin term for possession is 9/10 of the law. And for better or for worse, since 2017, we took possession of it. Now, we can all sit around and talk about, well, we took something in possession that we would have never taken possession of if we knew 3 years later it would start to show us. Well, it does. We got to do something about it. So, this today to me was the first foray to at least explain to the town board the condition. And the last page was the action plan that is being proposed to go down the path of fixing this or whatever. The nice thing is, it doesn't need to happen by the end of the year because of what I said earlier. The New York State Department of Transportation bridge experts have now given us that it's going to last 10 to 15 years. That's nice. But I think we need to keep this forefront of our action plan because we need to get this done sooner than later. Because if we did kick it down the road, I mean, I don't know if anybody realized we have some inflation going on in the world. It'll probably cost the town exponentially more money if we go to fix it in 6 or 7 years. And the reality is, when town administrations turn over and new board members, it's not unprecedented. It's forgotten. And 12 years from now, there's something happened where the bridge collapses, and we're like, well, how the heck did that happen? And somebody goes and dusts off the archives and sees that there was a workshop back in 2022 that said that's exactly what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years. Not to be morbid, but so that wasn't really Q&A, wasn't it? That was more commentary.
Sorry.
But
I mean, I appreciate all the hard work that you've done on it, and I'm actually feeling much better that I'm educated and up to speed on what's going on with it. And I'm sure this isn't the last time we're going to see this.
yes, and
I'm a little skeptical on grant opportunities. Because when I drive around the city, not so much the town, and I look at the condition of some bridges, I think that they're going to rise to the list much faster than this one, but
yeah, I mean, you're being realistic, not really skeptical.
I'm not going to ask the specifics, but if we look at the costs, the cost to the last two solutions, what's going to happen?
No. At this point, it's been a fact-finding situation, trying to get the appropriate parties involved with that effort to try to figure that out. So we have gotten to a point of actually solidifying any of these
And it's not something we would do in-house, I assume, correct?
Haven't made it that far. I mean, box culvert is within our capabilities of installing. We've done it for the county and ourselves before. Yeah, so that could be a potential cost savings area to perform the installation in-house. But given what's there now and what we might do, and the wide variance in what the actual replacement or repair plan might be, it's just really not appropriate to even speculate right now what the cost would be. This infrastructure is very expensive. I can say that. There's such
It's
a wide
expensive,
range.
and it would take time.
Yeah, time that, if we do use our own staff, the biggest issue with that is we save money overall, but other things don't get done, to put it very
It would have to
basic.
be done in season. I mean, it's not something you can do.
Yeah, no, well, and there is no season, so winter is not the construction season for
Right.
drainage, winter is plow season, so, yeah, you don't even have that option, and it really can't be done passively, closing a road. This isn't a situation where we have one lane open for this type of construction. That entrance would have to close, so we would want to, whoever does it, hit it very quickly to minimize the impact to the folks that use it on a daily basis. Really shorten that timeline as much as possible, regardless of the proposed solution.
Councilman Abbott just asked me if this was the only way in, isn't that? And I said, yes,
No.
but there's another,
No.
okay.
Yeah,
Where-
which is via other residential streets.
Yeah, we have drive through those numbers.
Yep. Yeah, there's another
Okay.
street, one over, then you
Yes.
come through the
Yep.
neighborhood through a connector road with it, which is what I think some of the heavier traffic.
Yeah.
No, this is not the only access.
So we could close the entrance off and do the work and then reopen.
Yep,
yes.
It's inconvenient, but it could be done.
yes.
Yes. And, one other thing I want to bring up is that leading up to tonight's presentation by Mary and Pat, we used this agenda item tonight as kind of a prototype of something that we've been bantering around as far as communication from the town government to our citizens. We know we post these agendas in the Webster Herald and on Facebook and on our website. But because this is so specific to a neighborhood, people that live on Pathway Lane and people that live on
Arbor Creek.
Thank you, thank you.
Creekfield.
Creekfield, that's right, is that we reached out to their homeowners association president. We also, with emails and information we had on the citizens, to let them know a couple of days ago that you might want, this is happening. And this presentation, and you might want to, and I take it, Dennis, that's why you're here tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So it wasn't because you saw it in the Webster Herald or on our website. You overtly got some communication from the homeowners association president or from my office.
Yes, my name is Dave Denolfo.
Oh, did I say Dave? I'm sorry.
And
Yeah.
I'm a resident of Arbor Creek, and right now, the community is transitioning into the homeowners association
Yes.
board.
Yeah.
And I am on that board, so
Good. Good.
this is my first task.
Yeah. And from fairness standpoint, full disclosure, we also reached out and let the developer know it too, that if they wanted to attend or watch or whatever. So, as time goes on, as we have very specific presentations that affect a certain neighborhood, we're going to try to do that because, Bill and Patty, you've been on the board the longest. Charlie, you've been here. The old, I didn't know about that. That comes up sometimes 2 to 3 weeks after a board presentation. We're going to try to eliminate that in the future. So, well, any other questions or comments, Jenny?
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
It's very, very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Very glad. All right.